we're going to have our first speaker, and her name is Rebecca Schroeder. Right? And she is running for State Representative District 4. She's formerly the co-chair of the National Advisory on the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And she's really passionate, with good reason, about health care. And she is a woman who is stepping up. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Rebecca Schroeder.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca. I am running for office to represent Idaho in District 4. That's Coeur d'Alene, for those of you who don't know. I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak to you today and to share the stage with Paulette Jordan, who you're going to hear from soon, who inspires me and gives me so much hope. I know she's going to do the same for you. So with my time today, I would like to share with you a few intimate stories from my life, and through these stories, to talk to some of the issues that are important to me as a woman and as an Idahoan. And I am an Idahoan. I was born in Grangeville, Idaho, and raised in the small town of Koosky, which I saw my first grade teacher here at Paulette Jordan's event this morning. Deanne Smith can tell you that I'm from Koosky. Koosky is in the Clearwater River Valley on the Nez Perce Reservation in central Idaho, population 691. So, it was one of those small Idaho towns where you couldn't get away with anything without, 10 people calling your mom. So, most of the people in the valley are ranchers or loggers. If not, you worked for the school district or maybe the one local grocery store. Everyone understood hard working for a living. I graduated from Clearwater Valley High School in 1996, and while I was there in the early 90s, a man named Bo Greitz developed an extremist compound in the wilderness area outside my small, close-knit hometown. The compound was called Almost Heaven, and the leader referred to it as a covenant Christian community. They taught paramilitary tactics and survivalist strategies to the people who bought property on the development, and they preached a militant form of religion. The leader of the group had been a military hero, but had morphed into a troubled man with an anti-government paranoia. And while he did not identify himself as a racist, he was tied to known white supremacists and promoted things openly, like the complete closure of the border with Mexico. Really, through his actions and his values, they were known as a white supremacist group in the valley. And while they were just building log cabins in the woods, we didn't notice them as much because everyone there just wanted to mind their own business. But when those extremists started inserting themselves into our local community, by coming to our town meetings and aggressively interacting with the locals, it caused a lot of fear and a lot of problems in our small community. I worked at a restaurant between Koosky and Kamiah during high school called Jalinda's Family Dining. And that's where I waited on Bo Greitz on several occasions. He typically had his wife with him, and you could see the power that he held over her from a mile away. This man was a bully and a sexist on the grandest scale. And as a 16-year-old girl, I remember feeling so scared and intimidated by him and just wanting to avoid trouble. Mostly, though, I felt worried and sick for his wife, who was sitting next to him with her hands folded in her lap, and I just felt so scared for her. But I felt powerless as a 16-year-old girl. So I marched that dinner out to his table, and I served it to him, but I hated the way that it made me feel, and I hated what it did to my community, and I did not like marching to that tune. Now, as a 40-year-old woman, when I see the events taking place around the country, like we see in Charlottesville, or perpetrated by our own administration to normalize racism and sexism, I know that it is time for me right now to stand up and run for office. Right now. Because there is nothing to be gained by condoning the oppression of one group by another. And if we don't rise up for equality in every way right now, we risk losing the progress that our grandmothers and our mothers and our brothers and sisters of every color worked so hard to achieve. We must march together to a new beat. So after high school, I moved to Moscow, where I would attend the U of I. That's right, and after some deliberation, I chose chemistry as my major. And I know, and I landed a job in the research lab the second semester of my freshman year. My research dealt with using purified natural compounds to clean up freshwater lakes on reservation land right here in Idaho. It turns out that water rehabilitation programs were necessary 20 years ago when I was in college, and they're even more necessary now. Because, see, we have a combination of variables in Idaho that leaves us very vulnerable. We have this breathtaking natural beauty paired with science-denying leadership. This is dangerous. I learned about the heavy metals working their way into our fresh water, and then subsequently fish, and then humans, or plants, and then humans, and how most of these pollutants could be traced to industrial or agricultural sources. And I guess the good news is that chemists and scientists have been aware of the extremely negative ways that humans can impact the environment for a long time. This is not fake news. This is real. So the Renfrew building is the chemistry building at U of I. And the basement and the first and the second floors of the building are classrooms and lab space, but the third and fourth floors are designated for research. So all the grad students basically lived up there on cots, and nobody had any idea what they were doing, but it seemed very exciting. And I was so, I was stoked to be working in the department. So I went to work and discovered, literally within hours, that if I needed to use the restroom, I was going to have to walk downstairs to where the general student population roamed. And I will never forget the moment that this all clicked in my head and I realized it, because I went looking for the restroom, found the men's room, no women's counterpart. It's not across the hall. It's not at the other end of the hall. I mean, it's one hallway. I'm just like, what am I missing? I finally asked a professor who confirmed that I was not blind, and in fact, the women's rooms did not exist on the research floors, because when that building went up, there were no women in that space. So why waste the money on putting a bathroom there? So that really ignited something in me. And nothing motivates me more than being underestimated. So from that moment on, I was determined to prove that I belonged there. So I gritted my teeth and I marched up and down those stairs, hundreds, maybe thousands of times. This was pre-Fitbit, so there's no way to know for sure. But I worked even harder, and I graduated with honors, and I received a national award for my research, and I held my head high. Now, recently, like within the last 10 days, our administration announced that the EPA is dropping a rule requiring mining companies to prove that they have the financial means to clean up the pollution caused by their activities. I don't like that either. States like Idaho have the most to lose by ignoring environmental science and the human impact on our land, air, and water. We have one Idaho, and it is for the inhabitants to cherish, not for corporations to destroy. We need leaders that will fight diligently to protect our environment using science, which seems to have become a bad word in Idaho. Now, Luke Malik holds the seat that I'm running for now, and he's been quoted as saying that he believes volcanoes are the biggest contributor to our climate change issue here. And giggle if you want, but this is not funny. This kind of ignorance is absolutely dangerous for Idaho. Environmental policy cannot be made by people's beliefs. We must use evidence-based science. So also at U of I met my husband, Brock, in the engineering physics lab. Very romantic. And we moved to Coeur d'Alene together after college, where we've lived for 12 years. In 2007, our son Brady was born. And just 2 short weeks later, he was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, which is a rare genetic disease. We learned that cystic fibrosis affects many organs in the body, most profoundly the lungs and the digestive system. Respiratory failure is typically what ends your life with cystic fibrosis. And when my son Brady was born, he was given a life expectancy of 37 years old. I was 30 at the time. It took me many months of really just freaking out, I don't know what else to call it, to come to terms with his diagnosis that would come to rule our lives, with frequent trips to specialists, inhaled breathing treatments and airway clearance treatments to help his lungs function, and giant handfuls of expensive pills. Brady's 10 years old now. He still takes about 40 pills a day. So I spoke about my background in chemistry, and after my son was diagnosed, I turned to what I know, which is science, and I began attending the big national research conferences hosted by the nonprofit Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Because although I had found a way to function, I was still extremely motivated to not have to bury my child. So I decided to figure out where I should go back to school, and this time focus on pharmaceutical chemistry rather than environmental chemistry. I figured I'd better get to work on trying to cure him myself. So I attend these conferences, and they are attended by thousands of the most brilliant biochemists and genetic scientists on the planet. And I quickly learned, to my delight, that the path to treatment for diseases like cystic fibrosis was already well into development. In fact, when Brady was only 4 years old, a new drug was approved by the FDA to treat a subgroup of patients that he fit into with a specific genetic mutation of cystic fibrosis. This drug treats his disease at the cellular level, adds immeasurable quality to his life, and is anticipated to add decades to his life expectancy. It's my wildest dream come true. And I actually have the drug molecule tattooed on my foot. Like, it's so huge for me. But I have to tell you that it's a special kind of torture to watch your child struggle to breathe. You know, it's sort of like having a front row seat to watching them slowly drown and not be able to do anything about it. So the day that Brady's new treatment was approved was the best day of my life, and we got to ease our child's suffering and help give him the life that he deserves. I learned that it was actually the policy, not so much the science. The science was rolling. It was the policy that was going to set the pace to produce new treatments for diseases like cystic fibrosis, and then once they're produced, to finally be able to access them. So I started working in advocacy, and I served as the Idaho State advocacy chair for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for several years before I moved into the role of national advocacy co-chair for the nonpartisan nonprofit organization. And when I did my advocacy work for the foundation, I refused to let my child's ability to breathe be reduced to a D or an R. I think healthcare is a human issue. And I had the opportunity, because of this, to interact deeply with our Idaho lawmakers, both in Boise and in Washington, D.C. And I can actually thank them for motivating me to stand up here today. I am here because I have been banging my head against a wall in Idaho for nearly a decade. And as hard as I try, I feel like I have failed miserably as an advocate for children with rare diseases because I have gotten absolutely nowhere. One perfect example of that, Idaho is one of only 18 states that has not accepted the Medicaid expansion. And you're going to hear more about Medicaid expansion from my friend Emily in a minute. She's going to talk to you about all of the ways that we could benefit. But I can tell you from my perspective that over half of children with cystic fibrosis and more than a third of adults with the disease depend on Medicaid as a vital source of coverage, and they will tell you that it provides enormous value for them. For people with serious diseases like cystic fibrosis, access means everything. It is directly linked with life expectancy. And just a little ways north in Canada, where our neighbors treat cystic fibrosis with the exact same medicines, people enjoy an extra decade of life expectancy because they do not face the same obstacles to access care that we in America do. I can tell you, after sitting face to face with them for many years, Paulette aside, she's wonderful. I wish we could clone her. But many of our current leaders are not motivated by the needs of regular Idahoans. And they cannot be swayed by facts or the suffering of the people that they serve. I know because I have tried. I have personally discussed the benefits of expanding Medicaid with our leadership, and they have assured me that they will never put their support behind anything that is associated with President Obama, regardless of what it means for Idahoans. They have used the term revenge politics in meetings that I've had with them. I'm standing here today, boo, yes, boo. I'm standing here today because I've spent the last 7 years meeting with people like our current representative, Raul Labrador. It has been a soul-shattering experience for me to march into his office again and again and tell him my story and plead with him to listen to logic and to consider humanity. I think that many of us have seen, especially over the course of the last year, that many of our leadership seems to be working against us. So for me, all of the stories that I've shared with you today highlight power imbalances in our society. When men with grandiose visions like Bo Greitz or the many modern examples that we can see today threaten the peace in our communities, we the people, lose. When it's assumed by the powerful that women don't belong in certain fields of study or in certain workplaces, we all lose. When powerful people ignore science and evidence that humans have a dramatic impact on our environment, we, the people, and Idaho loses. And when we have powerful lawmakers like Raul Labrador legislating without a single shred of compassion or respect for logic and reason, everyone loses. So for months before I announced my candidacy, I tried desperately to reject this idea of running. And I said no to Luke Mayville and to the Kootenai County Dems and to the cystic fibrosis families that asked me to run, because I actually love my new job now. I work as a personal trainer, and my family doesn't have a lot of money. We just paid off our student loans. We drove a Kia up here for the talk. I have a 10-year-old at home with special health care needs, and I honestly just want to chill out. We've been through a stressful, several years. I just want to do some yoga and hang out. But I kept hearing this voice in my head, and it got louder and louder and louder until it was screaming at me, and it said, "If not you, who?" So we're gonna need to do a lot of yoga because we're gonna have to run for office. If we want to change that power differential, we have to take seats at the leadership table. When I marched that chicken fried steak dinner out to Bo Greitz, in my stomach, I felt fear. And when I marched up and down those steps in the chemistry building, I felt bitter determination. When I marched into Representative Labrador's office, I just feel sick. But I'm done marching to their tune. I am running to win, and we are going to write some new music to march to, one whose melody echoes kindness and compassion and equality, one whose rhythm pleases the people, not the powerful. You're helping write that song by being here today. I have several team members with me here today that if you want to learn more about my campaign or the things that are important to me, you can talk to them. Please follow me on social media at Rebecca for Idaho. My website is up and running, RebeccaForIdaho.com. I just did a podcast with a group called The Real CDA, where you can hear me speak about policy positions in an hour-long conversational format. I am going to work so hard to win this election because I love Idaho so much, and the future of our state depends on compassionate and authentic leadership. Thank you.
go.